Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 30th episode of the Sales Call Overhaul show. Thanks for being with us. We really appreciate you, even if we don't know what your name is right now. We'll find out your names later and definitely not hunt you down. We want good relationships with our listeners, not weird, stalky kind of relationships that some marketers have. We would never do that. Right, everybody?
Right.
Good, good.
Too
I'm glad to
tired.
hear- Yeah. We don't have the energy for that kind of activity, right? We're going to talk about several things today. The first, you can already see this thing on screen. We're going to talk about the thing we call Jeremy DeMerchant. And so, Jeremy, we are
Hello,
so
Sam.
excited because we have brought Jeremy on as our sales director. We could not be happier with this. He is our sales manager now, and he is an international best-selling author of the is the book called Permission to Sell, or is that the course that you have?
No, the book is called Put Me in Coach.
Put Me in Coach. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. And he has the sales training course Permission to Sell, and we were so impressed with him and so pleased with his attitude. We've interviewed him before here on this show, but we just liked everything about him. And so we decided, let's see if we can get him to come work with us. And he did. He did, everybody. Look at this. He's working with us now. So now we've got two Jeremys in this very small company. We've got 8 people in our business right now, and 1/4 of us are Jeremy so far.
We're taking over.
Right. So that's not confusing at all in our teamwork chat and all that kinds of stuff. We have to make sure we tag each other properly nowadays.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. Jeremy, I'd love to hear in a minute. I'm going to warn you before I ask it to you, but I'd love to hear in a minute about your experience so far, your thoughts so far working with us. If you could please keep your bad to good ratio at 50-50. I'd appreciate that. But,
I'll do what I can.
Yeah. But we're just so happy. Jeremy has sold an awful lot of stuff. He's been in the high ticket space for a while, and his philosophy fits with ours. The zero pressure philosophy, the backwards close philosophy, the what we call our triple close ideas. The way that he was already thinking fits into that stuff, and it fits with that stuff really, really nicely. And we just couldn't be happier to have you, man. We're so pleased.
It's a pleasure to be part of the team.
Yeah. So what are you thinking so far?
I think that this company is a group of amazing people who have lots of fun. And what I really love is the internal transparency and how everything, open communication, ultimately all roads lead to clients being happy. Mm-hmm. And there's no, there's a lot of companies that is like, okay, well, this is just for us and don't let so-and-so see this. But the closing engine is completely transparent to all members of the team. And I think that's really, really powerful because it's easy for everybody to feel like they're a part of it. So when I'm working with the sales team, there's no guessing games. They already know what's going on, and it just allows everybody to feel like they're 100% part of the company.
Cool. Well, so that's the bad stuff. And are you going to say anything good? So, yeah. We appreciate that. We work very hard to create that kind of transparency and that kind of fun. We don't always succeed on fun, but we do work for it when we can. So awesome. Well, I got a few people wanting to hear about the triple close methods that we use. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between tension and pressure, because we talk a lot about having a zero pressure process and having a zero pressure philosophy in our phone calls. But there has to be a dynamic tension. There has to be some reason to move off of zero in any kind of decision. So I thought we would just ramble a little bit on our thoughts on that. It's not something we've really talked about much before between the three of us, and I figured that might be a fun little discussion there. We'll also be taking questions. We'll be taking your questions. So if you have questions, then let us know, and we will be happy to elaborate as we can, as long as we're not just making something up on the fly and that's all we know about it. So we're very happy to just interact with everybody today. So
anything sales or marketing related, funnel related, that kind of thing.
I'll answer questions about socks as well.
Will you? Will you? Well, okay. Or
Yeah.
underwear purchases and
No, no, I'm
how
not
they
going to
think
talk
you're.
about. Actually, we could
You've
talk
been
about.
retargeted, man. YouTube thinks I'm Latino and serves me Spanish-speaking ads quite often.
Yeah. We've had some fun little adventures in retargeting lately. So I buy underwear on Amazon, and so Amazon sells that information to 500 different places. And so I think that what's happening is that these advertisers say, well, he buys underwear on Amazon and he's got a Pinterest account, must be gay. So I've just started getting a bunch of gay advertisements in my browser. And it's like, these are not really the behavior patterns that I would have expected to be targeted on there, but all right, whatever.
So be careful when you're screen sharing.
Exactly.
Right. No.
Right. Yeah. I look at my Pinterest. I don't show that to other people before I look at what's in the stream lately, because I don't know how to get rid of those. So it's like, that's become kind of not quite so useful as a public vision board now through screen sharing. Yeah. So the triple close stuff. We have talked about this for a while in the form of the buyer commitments. And these 3 closes that we use, this allows you to close upfront. It allows you to do better upfront contracts. It allows you to do better up middle contracts. And basically, it keeps you from ambushing someone at the very end of a phone call with, okay, here's your sticker shock. What are you going to do with it? Kind of attitude. And it's very easy to get into the follow the normal coaching sales script that everybody seems to use. It's pervasive.
What are you going to do with it?
And so the coaching market is very accustomed to this kind of call, and they're accustomed to not getting any kind of value from it. They're accustomed to just being hard sold, even from people that say they are not hard sellers, from people that say they don't use high pressure tactics. It's very easy to say that, but it's much harder to actually stay away from high pressure tactics in the call. So this triple close way of thinking is really about, okay, let's close on this piece up at the beginning. Let's close on this piece next. Let's close on this piece next. And this is separate from the agenda setting stuff. This is once we get into the emotional part of the call, the part where you can see does this person really have a connection with these ideas that we're talking about here? Jason and I don't like to talk about know, like, and trust. That's marketing stuff. That's not so much sales stuff. If you don't have that already, by the time you're on a sales call, you don't have a lot to talk about. You're in a cold call. So we like to talk about resonance and respect. And there might have been another R. Jason, do you remember? Relevance. That's right. We did have the 3 R's. Yeah. So we'll talk about that in another video very soon. That's a very different perspective than most people use. And I don't want that to fall by the wayside, because that's important to me. But these 3 buyer commitments, the triple close, you're going to close on unsolvable problem, sizable problem, or sizable unsolvable problem, an SUP. You're going to close on return on solution, and you're going to close on why this, why now. Those are your 3 closes in a high ticket sales call when you're using this backwards close. This lets you be much more flexible in your calls because you're not following a script. You're saying, okay, I need to hit these 3 items at some point in the call. And it also lets you say, okay, this is not a good fit much sooner in the call. When you're using typical ambush scripts, you don't know whether you're going to get anywhere until the end of the call. Now, a skilled salesperson, they get a feel for it. They get an intuition about that pretty quickly. But someone who's learning sales, you don't know what's happening until they say yes or no to your price, until you start getting your objections or not. It lends itself to objection handling. And it's just, it's a very slow way of doing calls. Guys, I'm talking a lot here. Do y'all have thoughts so far? I'll keep talking if you don't.
I have plenty to contribute. You just say when.
Go for it.
Oh. Now? You mean right now? No.
Well, you tell me when then. That's fine.
Okay. So we forgot about the tension thing, and I want to get back to that because you talked about value in the call, right? These things will enable you to give value to that prospect because they probably have not thought about these things before.
Yeah.
Okay? When you start to get into size of the problem, for example, I run this thing called monetizing the problem. That's one direction.
That's
Return
the dollar
on investment is the
level
other investment,
Mm-hmm.
right? They usually have not thought of these things before. Now, in business, $100,000 problems are lying around all over the place. $500,000 problems are lying around. Any business of any reasonable size has these problems.
Exactly.
And it's significant. But that prospect probably hasn't really done the math before. So you're giving them big time value. Now, back to tension. When you realize you have a $500,000 problem, well, gee, you're probably going to have an emotional reaction to that, right?
Yep.
And this is still fairly early in the first third of the call, let's say. That you discover this stuff in the first few minutes. Now, one thing that salespeople ought to do if they want to get any good at it is become comfortable with that prospect being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Okay. The tension, you're not putting pressure on them. They're realizing themselves, holy cow, I have this $500,000 problem. They're doing it to themselves, and it's okay. You're not hurting them. They are becoming aware of a serious problem. So then when you proceed through and you tie it in, why this, why now is great because it gets into something else called vision of the future. Right? That is built into this thing. They have to have a motion picture running in their head. Okay? And they will. And it'll be either if we do the old school thing, which is I talk a little bit, I do a bit of discovery, then I rely on the pitch to be my lever and do the heavy work, ambush them with the price and see what happens. Their vision, their little motion picture that they're running is going to be, I'm going to have to give this $8,000 and I'm going to have nothing to show for it and all this work I'm going to have to do and it might not turn out and I got nothing. And that's the movie they're playing in their head. But if you've helped them through this process with these 3 commitments, you will help them. This is the value you're giving. Give them a different motion picture. Oh, I'll be cleaning up this big problem. I see my ROI. I have a clear image of what I'm going to have to do, the action that I'm going to have to take. Oh, I'm going to have to hire somebody because we explored that on the call, right?
Yep.
And that's the positive future building vision, that motion picture they're running in their head, and that is what leads to sales. So if you're interested in what we've been talking about these 3 commitments, start studying them and applying them and looking to help that prospect create that movie in their head. I'm going to stop talking now and let somebody else pitch in.
Yeah, and I want to say another piece to that action. I love the motion picture analogy because for people that are newer to sales, one mistake people often make is trying to put words in their prospects' mouths, right? And so to build on the analogy that's already there, the difference between you using your words and you having them say it and use their words is about bringing that movie into focus, right? It's
about a 300% difference in power, more 800%.
Absolutely.
You know my line on that, Jeremy.
Jason likes to talk about this.
I wish I had a statement on that. You say it, Jeremy, because then it's true.
I can say it. Yeah, Jason says all the time. If you say it, you have to defend it. If they say it, it's true. I mean, it's that level of difference in emotion, in the psychological profile of the problem, in their level of being able to commit to it, to really get inside it. It's a night and day difference right there.
Absolutely.
I love that. And this is the tension. I want to go back to the tension versus pressure thing again as well. This is something that a lot of folks in the coaching community in particular, or in the heart-centered entrepreneur community in particular, there's a lot of overlap with internet marketing in those communities. And that's kind of where I think all three of us come from with this type of remote sales that we do now, that with the done for you sales teams that we provide. But we've all trained plenty of people in these methods in this area, and it comes up a lot. A lot of these folks do not understand the difference between tension and pressure, and so they try to avoid both of them. You cannot avoid both of them. You cannot. You have to have tension in order to have a sale. You have to have that. Some people call it an emotional roller coaster, and it doesn't need to be a really dramatic thing, but it needs to be engaged. Your prospect needs to be engaged with the ideas that you're talking about, that they are talking about. They engage way better with their own ideas than with your ideas. So I liked the way that Jeremy put it. I've memorized the way that Jason puts it. And Sandler trainers call this painting seagulls as well. They talk about it peripherally when they talk about painting seagulls. Don't paint seagulls. Don't put something of your own into the prospect's head because it may not fit. Go with them. Let them paint their picture. You hand them the paints and you hand them the paintbrush and etc. But let them paint the picture. Guide them into the kind of picture that is going to be useful and helpful and is going to serve them best. That's what you're there for as a salesperson in this kind of situation. Is you're there as a servant to them. And it's not something where you can't be, what do you call it? Expert. You can't have expert positioning, or you can't have authority positioning. You can have that. You can absolutely have that and still be a servant. We get people all the time. All three of us have people tell us that we are experts. And in our sales calls for the closing engine, the questions that we ask in our sales calls to see if we're going to take someone on as a client, they differentiate us really hardcore from other from contract closers or from high ticket closers and stuff like that. We probably have 70% of the prospects that we talk to say, wow, I know you guys know what you're doing because the questions you ask are different. These are really good questions. I've never thought about these before. So it's not something that we're trying to do to position ourselves as experts. We're not going to go overboard on asking weird questions or anything. They have to be real questions. It's just, we know what our prospects need. We know what our projects look like. Our onboarding project is 6 or 7 pages long now, just task. It's this huge monster of a project. And it's we know every single piece of that is necessary to make it work. And so your expertise can come through in a lot of different ways while still being humble, while still maintaining that servant's heart that is so important with a zero pressure process. So keep that in mind. You don't have to mess with that. That's not the tension you're trying to create. The tension of engagement is what you need. It's when you have when you're towing a car and you get the other vehicle out in front and that chain comes up off the ground and pulls taut. You have to have that to be able to control things properly, to be able to get that car anywhere. If they're broke down by the side of the road without you, you got some work to do. So you have to get them engaged, but you don't have to pressure them. So thinking in terms of these 3 closes, and I really do think of them that way. It's not one close at the end. I really do think of these as the important closes that you're going to have in that call. It's sizable, unsolvable problem. Where are they without you? Is that a place that's worth spending significant amounts of money on? Is this something that's worth spending triple the amount they'll spend with you on? How big is this problem to them? If they don't have an unsolvable problem, you don't have a sale. If they can do it themselves, then you haven't found your unsolvable problem there. And that's okay. Some people literally aren't your prospect. That's just a screening issue. Sometimes you'll get those on the phone. But if you know they're your prospect, if you know they ought to be a client of yours, and you're not getting them to engage with the idea that they have a big problem, we're in high ticket sales after all, and that they cannot solve it themselves, you're not going anywhere. There's no reason for them to engage with the rest of anything you're talking about when they don't have a big problem they can't solve by themselves. For instance, at the closing engine, one of the biggest problems that we solve for our done-for-you clients is time. They're out of time. They're scaling their business, and they don't have the time to do their own sales calls anymore, and they don't have time to manage a sales team of people who are fresh out of training and they've never really done sales before. And sales management takes an awful lot of time, and most entrepreneurs don't realize that. So
Hi, Jeremy, too.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yep. Yeah, that has been such a blessing for me to not have to manage our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful sales teams here at the closing engine, because Jeremy's taking that over. And he's doing a better job than I was doing because my attention was split 6 or 7 different ways every day. And so, I mean, we're practicing what we preach here. This is it, folks. This is it. So that's the sizable, unsolvable problem that we go after more than anything else. That, and they can't figure out how to scale. We help a lot with scaling type things. Then the second thing is return on solution. This is where we do a lot of handing them paints so they can paint the vision of the future. What do you see happening working with us? What is this worth to you? Kind of attitudes here. And you're not talking about your own price. You're talking about what is solving this problem. What is putting a solution in place worth? And that requires some significant exploration, significantly more than most people do.
Mm-hmm.
This is, goodness. Well, I'm not going to even try and explain how important that is. I can't get close to it.
I view it like a big cave.
Okay.
You've been handed a flashlight.
All right.
And you're standing there with the prospect, and your job is to help them shine that light around to see what's in the cave. Oh, there's a sleeping bear over there. Oh, there's some bats. So there's a stalactite, there's a pond of water over there. We got to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
Without your help, they probably won't do it. So this, again,
they would have solved it already if they'd had help doing this kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, I want your opinion on this, Jeremy. How do you classify the situation where somebody is like really good at something? Let's say they build websites, and they want somebody to come mow their lawn. And the guy who mows the lawn says, "Hey, you could do this yourself." And the web designer's like, "Yeah, but that would be stupid." That's not really an unsolvable problem. And it's more like the web designer will not solve it themselves.
I do regard that as an unsolvable problem, actually.
Okay.
The problem is I don't want to mow my lawn. It's a different problem entirely. It's not that I can't mow my lawn.
Okay.
And that is a great point, because it speaks to the bad prospect or bad engagement issue. It's very easy to think you've got a bad prospect when really you just have engagement with the wrong thing.
Okay.
If you can't find someone's unsolvable problem, you're on the wrong topic. That's what it boils down to. And so you're not trying to put them into a box, into your standard unsolvable problems. You ought to know what your 5 standard unsolvable problems are. You need to know your target market really thoroughly. But everybody's going to be a little different here. This is not.
I want them to say it.
Yes.
Not me.
Yeah. And then I'm going to listen to them hard enough that I'm going to follow them wherever they went. I want to follow that up to their highest level of values that they'll let me get to.
Okay.
And on this kind of call, when we have 50 minutes to do that, that is plenty of time to go all the way up to the top, the way up to the top. When somebody starts, when you start asking someone questions like, in the end, what does that do for you? Ultimately, what does that get you? Questions like that 2 or 3 times, you get there real fast. I learned that from Kenrick Cleveland, by the way. He calls it values, or he calls it criteria elicitation. In the end, ultimately, you put that tag on the front of the question as you follow the value ladder up, and it gets you to the top very quickly. And usually within, what's that?
Still, if people out there watching record their calls and listen to them, as we advise, if you find yourself pitching at the 20-minute mark, in a 50-minute call, you're pitching too early and you are not digging deep enough. If you ask a few more questions like the ones Jeremy's talking about, you will fill up that extra 10 minutes or so.
It takes time.
Do not pitch before half an hour.
And you can also relax about that pitch, because the pitch is an afterthought. When you're doing these 3 closes beforehand, the pitch is not the same thing as the close. That's not what Jason's saying. And
close happened back there.
Exactly.
The pitch is supporting evidence. And lining
that
up.
Is perfect. I was going to say it's the rational justification for the close, but I like yours so much better. It's just it's the supporting evidence. It's the thing just to tie everything down very neatly. It's the bow. So what we want with those, when we follow those values elicitations up the ladder, within 2 or 3 questions, people will start saying things like they say, I don't have enough time for our clients. I can't scale the business. I don't have enough time. Oh, okay. Well, we can probably help with that. So if you had more time, what would that ultimately get you? Just 2 or 3 questions like that. And I go, oh, well, I could take the weekends off and I get to see my family more. Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think I'm with you now. All right. So if you could do that, what would that do for you in the end? And once you're at their top level of values, as long as you have decent rapport with them, then usually 2 or 3 questions in, they're going to start being confused at your question. They're not going to be able to go any higher. So once somebody says family or security or some concept where you're getting kind of abstract and it's obviously more like a feeling than something they can explain, you're pretty much done. That's it. They won't be able to take it any further, and you'll get a little bit of pushback on that. And then you can go, okay, well, I've got it. You write that damn word down. I mean, the actual literal word they said. Use their language. Oh, I cannot express how important that is. It makes things so much easier when you are willing to use their own language instead of making them translate into your mental language. Don't put that kind of work on people.
No Starbucks venti thing.
Thank you. Yes, let's do an article on that. No Starbucks venti type stuff. Yeah.
There is a conversation I had with a client a long time ago, and she used the word impact 12 times while I was going through questions. And so,
what do you think Jeremy's going to say? Yeah,
that's basically all I said for the rest of the call. Are you ready to make that impact? That's the close, right?
Yep.
And it makes such a difference. And to turn it around a little bit, I like, especially for people that are newer, I like to look at it as digging deeper, almost like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yeah.
And my rule is, if you're not sure how deep you're supposed to go, start with 6 layers.
Okay.
Yeah. It's okay. What's your challenge this time? Tell me more about that. And get more specific. And 6 is normally, I mean, it's not always 6, but it's a good kind of rule of thumb to start with, because then at least you're going to get to that point where they're going, oh, and they got to really think about the question, especially if it's And ultimately, what would this get you?
That is a good point. The questions that let you jump a couple of steps, they're a little bit trickier to ask. They're a little more nuanced. And I mean, the tone of voice plays into it and the tags play into it. So it takes a little while to dial that in. If you don't know how to ask these questions yet, yeah, 6 is really that's a good place to be right there. I like that. Thank you.
It fits in with the operations improvement training I've had as well, where
Mm-hmm.
you're asking why,
Yeah.
why, and usually it comes out to save the world at the ultimate. That's usually when
Yeah.
you know, and that's between 6 and 9
Yeah.
players. So I think it fits in really well.
You can do this. This doesn't just apply to sales. Jason made a great point right there. In our operations, most of the time, if one of my people is not doing what I want them to do and I'm getting all pissed off at something, I can almost always go, okay, why? And it almost always comes back to either a philosophical difference that I never bothered explaining to someone because I thought it was obvious, or it comes down to a training issue, which is also my fault. And so if we don't have processes in place, almost all these things come back to, do we have a process for them to follow? Why would they know to do that if we don't have it written down somewhere? And so it brings it back to something that, in that process improvement kind of thing, it brings it back to something controllable almost every time, where you're not just trying to put the vice clamps on a person, and it really lets you change things without having to get crossed up with people all the time. When I get crossed up with my people inside TCE, it is because I am not asking in that way. And that's usually the way that we get back in tune with each other as well, is why? Okay, let's follow this. Let's peel back all the way. And then, oh, now everybody's relaxed all of a sudden. Okay, cool. That works. So you mentioned the impact thing there, and using their language back to them. This is something that newbies get confused by a lot on a feelings level, because using someone else's language, speaking Spanish to them instead of forcing them to speak your English, this is uncomfortable when you're first learning to do it, or when you're out of practice and you already know how to do it. It's uncomfortable. You're speaking in a non-native language. You are sacrificing your comfort on that call for their comfort. It is a direct one-to-one ratio there. You cannot be selfish. This is a selfless kind of sales call. And so that it's part of the zero pressure thing. You're going to feel pressure on you. You're going to feel tension on you. That's your responsibility to bear that as a salesperson, so that you can serve that person, that prospect, wholeheartedly. And it just makes all the difference in the world. This is such a fundamental thing, and so many people don't do it regularly. And I mean, I'm guilty as well. When I come off of a sales call and I think, man, that was not a really engaged call, then I look at my notes and I say, I don't have their language written down. I was not speaking their language. It's just the biggest red flag that I can have for if a sales call went poorly. It's a super easy thing. You can literally see it on the page. So that's one of the boy, we could talk for a long time about that. We could go pretty deep into that. I think that's going to be what some of our role play is going to be about as we start doing more and more role play in the group. We've had a lot of people asking for role play, and we're listening. We're going to do it. That is, now that Jeremy's on board, I'm getting freed up and we have more manpower, and we're going to start doing a lot more role play live in the group. So that's going to be fun. Anyway, so that's 2 of the 3 closes of that triple close. Then the third one is why this, why now? And why this, why now gets you the timeline. and it gets you the interest they have in you and in your type of solution. So you don't have to ask this at the end of the 3. This is one of the reasons we don't use a script. It's because these 3 things need to happen, but they don't have to happen in this order. It really doesn't matter. So I often ask this one first. Out of those 3 closes, I dig into this one first. So what's different now? What's different than it was 6 months ago? You've mentioned that you've had this problem for 4 years now. Why are we talking now, 4 years in? What's the big deal? Why not just keep going the way you have been going? What got you in touch with me? Why are you on the phone call with me today instead of some other business coach or some other closer, or et cetera, et cetera? There are a lot of ways you can ask this. You can also turn that in the direction of the future. So what's coming down the pipe that this matters now? Are you under some kind of deadline, or what's going on? So these are the 3 closes: is sizable unsolvable problem, return on solution, value building, painting the vision of the future, etc., and why this, why now. And when you close on those 3 things, and you can tell that they're engaged with and committed to these 3 ideas right here, you've got your close done. And it's a low difficulty kind of close because you did it in pieces. You broke it up into 3 different chunks. Of course, we're always evolving everything that we do. So who knows what we'll be saying 6 months from now. But we have found that these 3 things are pretty consistent overall. We might change the language we use to describe them, but those 3 things do need to happen.
One of the great strengths of Why This, Why Now, if you've got a powerful marketing indoctrination program before it, is that people can come on the call feeling that they know you, or they know the program or the person that you're selling on behalf of. And what this does is it commonly has the effect of massively cutting down the "what am I going to get?" problem. You simply do not have to waste time explaining everything that you would in a giant pitch. They don't care. They want the thing. And I buy this way. I get excited.
I would say they do care. They've just already answered it for themselves.
Right. I know I'm going to get this result. I don't particularly care what the 15 steps are that I'm going to have to take to get through them, right? In the coaching program, just tell me what to do. I will do it. Right. So it just eliminates a lot of this long pitching. I hear 20 minutes of pitching a lot, half an hour of pitching on calls that I hear recordings of.
What's a good number for those that you like? Because I've got my number in mind.
10 minutes.
Pitch.
10 minutes.
I like to hear them under 2 minutes. I get uncomfortable when I hear a pitch longer than 2 minutes.
And one of the reasons,
we listen to different kinds of calls as well.
You can cut down. If you have been going through and listening on the call and exploring the cave and whatnot with your prospect and writing down, you will know what features of the thing that you're selling the prospect really values. This prospect, because although your thing could do 100 things, they're only going to value a few. Right? When I was in Vancouver, business development manager for an IT firm, we had a server rack firewall content filter thing that did 4 things. And our customers bought it for 1. Now, it was a different one of those 4 every time, but they only bought it for the 1 thing. And I could talk about the other 3 till I was blue in the face. They wouldn't care. They would buy based on the 1 thing. Now, 6 months later, they might come back and go, "Hey, Jason, love this thing that you sold us. We are now looking for one of the other 4 things." And I'd have the pleasure of telling them, "Well, you already own it. Turn this thing on." Oh, wow. So you can cut down your pitch to the 2 minutes, yes, by just providing the evidence around the few key things that they have indicated that they want.
That brings up a really great point, that if you start throwing the kitchen sink at people, After
Mm.
you've closed them on these three things,
Yeah.
their three things, not your three things, but their three things. After you've closed them on these things, don't start pitching a bunch of other stuff. You
Right.
don't want to open 13 more loops at the end of that call. That gives them unresolved stuff to
Right. What
deal
about
with.
this? Oh
And
my
they're going to have tons of questions. You're going to get things that sound like objections that would never have been, or actual objections that never would have been brought up in the first place if you had not started yapping. And I say yapping advisedly. It's like a chihuahua. It is meaningless to them until you force them to care about it.
Right.
And
And then
so
they get overwhelmed, and we know the old saw, a
a
confused
confused
mind
mind
says,
says no.
pretty please with no.
Right.
Yeah. And in my past life in online education, one of the strategies that I learned was when somebody has an objection, you answer it 1 or 2 lines max, and then you shut up.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, and then wait. Right?
Yep.
You don't need to decide to update them on the latest government documents on things that they've never asked about, because you're going to create more concerns that they never even thought of and probably don't matter to them. But suddenly they're going, "Oh, is this something I should care about because you brought it up?"
Yep.
And it's completely unnecessary. And not only does it lose you the sale most times,
Yeah.
but more importantly, you've created this barrier between you delivering something of value to the client, because that one conversation is usually the best time for them to make that buying decision. Because 3 months later, if you've been chasing them in follow up, they're not in the same mode. They're not ready to take action. They might have found some other solution, or suddenly another problem is more important. So when somebody has a problem,
they had to give up on it because they couldn't find the solution they want. That's so common in the fields we work in the entrepreneurial space. Oh, well, we decided to go in a different direction, and we're frustrated with that now too. So
yeah.
That's one thing that I learned from Jordan Belfort's straight line persuasion, straight line sales courses that I liked. He's a master of tonality, a master of scumbaggery and just cheathood, but he's very good at objection handling. And what he teaches is answer with a very short answer, just like you said, just 1 or 2 lines, and then deflect back around to 4 or 5 minutes earlier in the call. This is what he calls looping. If anybody has his course, I'm talking about looping. And you are not going over new ground in that loop. You're looping back to about 5 minutes prior in the conversation, and you're just going back through the same stuff that you covered. And his pet phrase is, and the beauty of the program is blah, 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 and just going back through the same stuff. And all that he's doing there is giving people time to process the answer. That's it. He talks about building value and stuff like that. And so, yeah, fine, that's fine. But the big thing that's going on there is you're giving them time to process so they don't feel like they've lost a negotiation. There are so many people that teach, and I'm sure this wasn't the case with your stuff for sales of that level, but there's so many folks. I've got a fair amount of call center training experience, sales training in call centers, and they teach how to rebuttal people. They call it that. They really do.
I always hated that word.
Yeah. You can rebut someone with a rebuttal, people, but you cannot rebuttal someone. It's not a word. It's not a verb. So they teach, okay, so you answer it with a paragraph and it sounds very scripted, and then you push for the close again. And it's kind of like that ambush mentality. It's kind of like that pressure mentality, because you're not giving someone time to not just think, but emotionally settle in to what you've just said. So it's like, well, what about so-and-so? This, that, and the other. How about now? You want to do it now? That's how it always felt to me. And it felt like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for a better way for a long time. And so I was very pleased when I found a low pressure sales tactic from Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. Who'd have thunk, right? But that's it's almost exactly the same thing as what you said. you give a very short answer to the question, because it's not necessarily an objection. Objections sound a lot like a buying question to a new salesperson.
Yeah.
They
Or
once
vice
someone
versa.
starts getting into the nitty gritty of, okay, how does this work and how does that work, and well, what about this and what about that? They're bringing up real concerns, but a concern is not the same thing as an objection. It is just as often a buying question, like a, okay, well, I'm getting dressed for this type of outing we're going to take together. It's the getting ready kind of question, and so you have to be sensitive to that. And you get such a lower level of even that kind of stuff. It becomes more obvious, I should say, the difference between an objection and a buying question when you do your closing in pieces, when you do a 3-piece close, because you get a lot of those questions out of the way at each step. You're asking the questions, and so their buying questions are pretty much done. It's a more natural conversation. It's not like, let's dig into your pain for 42 minutes, and then I'm going to pitch you for 15 minutes, and then you're going to buy, and I'm going to take your card over etc. It's so much more natural. It's so much easier. And as long as you're willing to serve them, it sets the stage for a much more comfortable and properly motivated relationship. The kind of things that we're selling here with services, they're often about relationships in a very big way. And you need to have a good relationship with this person. They're not buying a set of knives from you. This is some medium to long-term kind of thing here. And so just set it up right. Set it up right. Make things easy on yourself. Serve your client, and they will thank you for it. So that's really the big stuff that I had.
Jeremy Springer final thought.
I was gonna say something, but I didn't want to like
go for it.
No, I didn't want to. I wanted to end it on that note. Can you repeat that in like 2 minutes?
I'm kind of done with that. So yeah, now we can go anywhere y'all want.
If we go back to the why this and why now, I think the thing we also need to mention is that it's a really amazing qualifier if your process hasn't qualified to that point. I know I've been in situations where people have said, well, I worked with this coach and it didn't work, and I took this program and it didn't work. And there's a theme that a whole lot of things haven't worked. And sometimes the role that your role as a salesperson is to say, maybe the common trend is in the mirror.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to work on that, right? Because
very tactful.
Well, because ultimately, like when we're closing high ticket sales for ourselves or for clients, if we wouldn't want to work with that person, especially if it's a highly involved program, right? We don't want to, I know the focus is typically let's go close the sale, but it can't be. It has to be closing the right clients for the program because they need to be able to get the result. And if you have somebody coming in whose focus is, I didn't get this result because of this coach or this expert, and it's everybody else's fault that their success hasn't happened, then you need to have a really difficult conversation sometimes. And as long as they can acknowledge it, you can still move forward. But if they're like, oh no, I did everything I was supposed to, they're going to be a problem client for anybody you enrolled them for. And so you might need to give them a call back in 6 months when they've had a change of heart.
Yeah. If they're allergic to peanuts and all you've got to sell is peanuts, don't sell them your peanuts. They're going to be allergic to yours too.
You don't want to be coach number 4 who has
exactly.
Exactly.
We all made that mistake at least once.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, the why this, why now kind of question, we can often put some of that. I mean, we go over it really big in the sales call itself. But that's the kind of thing that you can start using to prep this call in your application, in your intake form for the appointment itself. We love asking that in the intake forms because it goes ahead and starts getting them into that mindset. It's one of the best qualifying questions that we've found. And ask it in a way that works for your business. I wouldn't just ask why this, why now. That's kind of shorthand and it wouldn't make a lot of sense to people. But
why do you want to work with so-and-so now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's there. We frequently put something along the lines of, "There are a lot of business coaches out there. Why are you interested in working with our client?" And the answers are really telling. If we start seeing a lot of answers in that application that are, "Oh, well, I saw an ad." Okay, well, that means we have an indoctrination process in our marketing system. And by the time they get to that application, they ought to be done. They ought to be interested in working with this person specifically. Otherwise, we're going into a cold call. They're going to be picking up the phone and going, "Oh, I'm just getting into the car," or
Right.
"Who are you again?"
Who
and
are you?
stuff like that. So if they're interested in you or in your client, if you're closing for someone else, then it's going to come out. It's going to come out right there on that kind of intake form if you bother putting it there. And it's going to give you a lot of really great data on how good your indoctrination sequence is, or your Christopher Goodrow calls it your oven, your
Hmm.
warming sequence. Just the time that people can spend just getting comfortable with everything that you do and kind of absorbing all the philosophy that you want them to absorb. But warming sequence, oven, indoctrination sequence, whatever you want to call it, if you're not getting good answers in that kind of thing, and if you're not getting good answers in the sales call either, then that lets you know you have a marketing problem. That cannot happen in a sales call. The why this, why now. It can't happen in a sales call the same way it can happen in marketing. You just don't have time. You have 50 minutes. And so you can explore. And if you're a very experienced salesperson, you can pull that one out. But if you're getting bad answers to that on a sales call, you're in a long shot situation. You're in a Hail Mary situation. So you don't want to be there as a newer salesperson. Well, you never want to be there, but um, it's not a really solvable problem on a sales call for a newer salesperson. So, yeah. Wow. Well,
Somehow we filled up almost an hour.
Boom.
we sure did. I did not. We were planning on being about a half an hour long here. Okay. Well, if you like hearing us talk as much as we apparently like hearing ourselves talk, and yes, I take most of the blame for that, then we will be doing more in the group. And we'll be putting links to various lead We've got a little ebook on how to make a good appointment application, and we will be giving away our call flow. We're going to make a worksheet on this triple close structure and give that away, because that's how we do it, and it works. And uh, when you have this kind of structure available to you as a new person, it just makes for um, a really comfortable sales call. You'll be able to relax in ways that you weren't able to before, because you can gauge what's happening in that call all along, instead of getting all worked up about what's going to happen at the end.
Right. Gee, I hope they value my XYZ.
Exactly, because it doesn't happen at the end. It happens here, it happens there as well, and you know it every single time, and it feels good. And it's not relaxed in the sense of having no tension. I mean, you can't push a rope, but it is relaxed in terms of not worrying whether that rope is going to break. That's how it is. You can trust the process. You can trust yourself, and you can trust that client all along, instead of having to find out, okay, are they trustworthy at the very end. So, all right, everybody. Any other thoughts that we should go over before we sign off here?
I think that was good.
Thinking
It was
back
awesome. You guys were fantastic. Thank you.
to 8 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So I just moved from Vancouver to the US, sat
Mhm.
through immigration, got my right to work, and
Yeah.
was working as senior consultant to a consultative sales training firm
Mhm.
here in Wilmington. And we did a lot of evening networking.
Yeah.
And I would meet a lot of local business owners, and like serious business owners. There were definitely cliques
Mhm.
But some were better than others. And I still drank back then. It was a couple more years until I quit. So we'd go out for beers after the
Mhm.
events, and I ended up hanging out with this group that included the owner of one of the big pharmaceutical companies here,
Mhm.
and he had a weird name. I didn't like the guy, but we were talking sales, and he said to me, "Yeah, well, you got to get him over the passion fence." And I was like, now, keep in mind, I was pretty new to Sandler,
Oh,
right? At the time, I'd
okay.
been working with it for 2, 3 years, right? So this just didn't
Mhm.
fit with me, right? But
Mhm.
I thought of this again recently, and maybe the guy was right. Because
Okay.
it depends on how you interpret the phrase passion fence, right?
Oh,
Because
I thought there was more to it. Oh, okay.
no,
Okay.
just like how do you see it as pushing them over the passion fence, or do you see it as eliciting their
Oh.
motivation that they will kick themselves over the passion fence or hop over
Uh-huh.
the passion fence, right? And these
Yeah.
three commitments, these three areas of inquiry, will
Uh-huh.
help them have the ammunition to get over the passion fence. So
Yeah.
I'm blessed with a pretty good memory, so that popped back into my head
You
from
are. Yeah.
quite a while ago.
Yeah.
So you can take these tools and use them with terms, I guess, that might even seem like old school Tom Hopkins features and benefits style selling,
Mhm.
right? And they turn into something useful.
So yeah. Yeah. So much of it goes back to the serving mindset.
Hmm.
When you have someone's best interests at heart, it can put a different spin on just about anything. I'm happy to learn from the Wolf of Wall Street
Hmm.
and take those techniques and
Right.
use them in a servant
Ethical way.
mindset. Yeah. Um, yeah. Learn from everywhere and record your sales calls. Damn it.
Yes. Do it.
Please record your sales calls.
Always record your sales calls. If you need something to record your sales calls with, then you can use, I think, freeconferencecall.com or uberconference.com. There are various bridge lines that you can use to call in for an impromptu thing if you need to record your sales calls so that you can send them in to us, and we will give you a free sales call overhaul. I had like 4 different things I was trying to say
What's
there, and I
that,
couldn't say
Jeremy?
any of them. The sales call overhaul is our basically the one that they're getting that they can win is the $1,100 version of the sales call overhaul, where we take your recorded sales call, transcribe it, timestamp it, give you detailed notes on everything that can change there, everything that we see that can change, and we see a lot of things. And then we go over it and just rebuild that into a finely tuned closing machine so that you can raise your close rate 10% in 5 calls or your money back. And we're very confident that if you're following instructions with the feedback that we're giving you, this is custom feedback that we're giving you, not sales training. Everybody needs sales training when they're selling. And there comes a point when you have to know what you're doing wrong, when you have to know what you're doing differently than what's going to work and how to fix that thing. So that's the niche that this is supposed to fill. So record your sales calls, send them in to us, apply to win. Facebook.com/sales call overhaul. You can submit one of your sales call overhauls from messaging our page, and we will choose a winner, and we will basically just give that to you. No, basically about it. We will give that to you. So yeah. All right. Well, have fun. Jason, would you let us know what's coming up next week or not coming up next week and all that
Nothing.
stuff?
No. We did move Ken from
Okay.
this week to next week.
Okay.
Uh,
Cool.
and we will be talking then about building a high ticket agency and what that's like.
Nice.
He got up to building $10,000-$15,000 website projects, which
Mm-hmm.
is far larger than what most people can get to, and then moved into e-commerce. And he and I talk occasionally and got into a great discussion about the troubles of scaling high ticket or large e-commerce stores.
Yeah.
And I think this is a discussion that is rare to have because a lot of people are struggling with Shopify stores. So I think it would be illuminating for us to see what happens when you get one of these things really chugging along.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work out how you think.
Right. Well, this will be
We'll
fun.
be talking with Ken next week.
Cool. All right. So that'll be episode 31.
Correct.
All right.
Sing us out, Emson. Thanks for being here, guys.
No.